So welcome to our fellow groups that are interested in Royal Park. So we've got the Royal Park Protection group, and we've got protectors of Royal Park and members of the Pastoral Association, and also any of our visitors. I can see lots of unfamiliar faces, so welcome everybody. This is a very special meeting we're having, and it's going to be really very interesting. So I'd like to welcome also our guest speakers, and we've got Associate Professor Alasdair and Associate Professor Vance. And then we've also our first speaker will be Andrew Hannah, who is a PhD researcher from Newcastle University. All right, so the theme of this meeting is the Warren Jerry aspect of Royal Park. Wondery. Yes, I know, but Kate found out that someone told her. Yes.
Warren Jerry.
Yes, that's right. So I think that's how I feel out. Yeah.
Warren Jerry.
Yes. So it's rather good to have this out in the forum, which lends a special meaning to our acknowledgement of country. So the Warren Jerry Roy Warren as the traditional custodians of the land of the Royal Park, and we pay our respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. Now this meeting's come about due to a meeting between our treasurer, Jenny, who's there, and Alasdair, and I think you were just walking in the park, aren't you? Yeah. So that sort of put Jenny and Kay's sort of heads together in planning today's special event. And Kay's just telling us a little background about the Friends of Royal Park. And I was interested in being a new member of the Friends of Royal Park. That's how long Friends of Royal Park has been running for, and so it's short in comparison to the Warren Jerry. So we started in 1991, and the Warren Jerry association with Royal Park goes back 40 to 60,000 years. So that's amazing. A little bit about our guest speakers, but before I go on to that, just to say how we've planned the meeting is that we'll have Alasdair and Janet presenting first for about 30 minutes. We'll have about 5 minutes for some questions, and then we'll go over to Andrew for his presentation and some questions there, and then we'll open it up for questions for all speakers at the end, and we'll also welcome people to stay and join us for afternoon meeting. So a little bit of background about our speakers. Professor Alasdair Vance shares Indigenous heritage together with 8 others, many similar with Indigenous heritage, and they prepared the report Not Royal Park in 2020. Alasdair is in the Department of Child Psychiatry at the Royal Children's Hospital, and among his interests are bringing community culture and country into the health area. Janet is co-author of the report, and she brought her interest in understanding and exploring Indigenous placemaking and reconciliation from a different perspective in her position at the School of Architecture, Building and Planning at the University of Melbourne. Andrew is a graduate researcher in the Linguistic Department at La Trobe University. He is undertaking a PhD with Professor Stephen Murray, who in turn is working with Warren Jerry elder Auntie Gail Smith on the meanings of Warren Jerry words in the dictionary. Auntie Gail, unfortunately, is away and could not be here today. Also, we invited the Warren Jerry Narrow Rangers, who are doing some teamwork in Royal Park and plantings and things like that, and they also could not be here. Our Secretary Kate was interested in finding a traditional Warren Jerry name for the main creek that runs through Royal Park West. It has no formal name, not even Royal Park Creek, and is only known as the Royal Park Main Drain. So there's a need for something better, I think, isn't there? When the name Hornon, is that a good pronunciation? All right. Came up in association with World Park. She turned to Professor Murray and Andrew, so we can look forward to what Andrew can tell us about going on in this school. All right, so now it's time to introduce our first speaker and welcome them to. Now, you can talk first.
Look, we will just kind of do a bit of freewheeling, I think.
Okay, all right. So please welcome our first speaker.
Very interesting that we met talking about bats because in the Northern Wildlife Country, we're just next to Jaguar Country, there's an amazing story about the microbat and its relationship with the emu, the female microbat and the male emu, and how their love shapes the plains country and the hills, going from Mount Emu up to Mount Cole, Langdura, and all the way through the Garraway. So, yeah, bats are very special. I like to just do an acknowledgement to in language, just because, you know, and we're married, by the way, so we've known each other a long time. That's why we're pretty real. We're hitchhiking, fishing about, more than about, beautiful, more than, you know, so I'm just in Warren, which is like north of Waterloo. Just acknowledging the access of the sport to this country. We're actually involved in a project here, cultural practices for young people for the Wajja Aboriginal Family Place, and so last week we'd like them out in the park with Aboriginal young person, the guardian, and Angel, who's doing research, and we've had quite an amazing sort of revelation of country because we're connecting relationship. The country is a subject. I've got a very big love for this Kulin in the tribal campground, and yeah, I don't have any affiliation with the royal family. That's why I've been pleased about the papers and not royal, because we've got that this place and its true significance really should not be framed within sort of the colonising. And it should be, because it is an extraordinary ecosystem. So we have kids that will get surrounded by honeybees, the blue mountain parrots, as you know, Bunjil pelters, fellow kids, parlon and magpie, insects, particular trees, and so the park has given us a very different revelation depending on what the kids were with. So this presentation is very much from the Aboriginal culture. It's not like a hybrid. So for me, it's living ecosystem has a spirit and that's what we're interested in knowledge.
Okay. So there's a bit of a background. The paper that you can may have read, you can download anyway, was prepared for a Society of Architectural Historians conference. So it's really challenging how heritage is recognised and legally, particularly, but also culturally, and World Park, particularly the subject. And it emerged in the context of yarns that we've been having with a lot of Aboriginal traditional owners from Victoria, not all Wurundjeri, but people that have come and had a strong connection to World Park over the course of their life. So it's really a polyphonic paper with 9 authors. We're just presenting it now, and I suppose I was positioning it really in relation to that kind of history of heritage. So if you want to just fast forward to the next slide, you can see who all that. We've got a bit of a hold on. So something's playing. So can we turn off the play? Otherwise, you're going to hear the architectural presentation, which might be a little bit boring.
That's not mine, or is it?
Yeah. Okay, so it might actually just start to run without you controlling it. Anyway, so I think we've missed the slide that. Oh yeah, next slide will show you the authors. Okay. So you can see Auntie Margaret Gardner, who passed last year, was an author. Uncle Gary Murray, Auntie Esther Kirby, who also passed last year, Moira Rayner, Sue-Ann Hunter, who's now Commissioner for Yorrook, Selena White, who's the manager of the Wedger team, and Sharon Monta, who also works in the Wedger team, for their voices populate this paper. So the research has been framed by a method that sits between Western and Indigenous scholarship. The term Indigenism has drawn on associations with other critical liberation theories like feminism and post-structuralism as a kind of liberation epistemology that describes alternative ways of setting up discourse that critique the dominance of Western ways of thinking in the academy. So these yarns have unfolded over many years, but they were recorded particularly for this paper when we were preparing it. Many of the authors will here recount quite personal and intimate stories about Royal Park. It's a place that they variously visited, retreated to for sustenance as part of their work and healing, enjoyed for leisure, one even lived here for a period of time. So the paper will begin with this overview of the colonial histories of Royal Park, and then it will turn to the ethnographic or Aboriginal account that I will tell you about in a bit more detail. And so we'll be reflecting on those Indigenous epistemologies or ways of knowing and doing and being around time and place that's offered as an alternative account to frame Royal Park's enduring significance for the Aboriginal community in Melbourne, or this particular group that we were working with. And we'll conclude with a speculation about what this means for histories of heritage, place, and contemporary practices for health and wellbeing in the park. So if you go to the next slide. Melbourne's urban pattern followed many of those in other colonial cities, with an organised grid of streets and a variety of open spaces for immediate and future civic needs set out. Royal Park is one of the larger parklands. It was originally 2,560 acres in all, and it was set aside by Governor Latrobe. And he talked about it for public advantage and recreation in 1854. Latrobe had a particular interest in the Aboriginal people who'd been observed in the Royal Park in the 1840s, camping, lighting fires and holding corroborees. But when gold was discovered 150 miles away, the population of Melbourne, as many of you would know, hopelessly outgrew the township, and a quick decision was made to encroach on Royal Park and to provide allotments for housing the emerging economy. So first, we kind of compressed to 700 acres and subsequently to just over 400 acres. Royal Park's edges, meanwhile, became transformed into places for recreation, places for recreation to sites for health and the advancement of Western knowledge. So you see all of those institutions that sit around the fringe. What are we up to? Yeah, that's right. That's what we need to be. So there was a flurry of agricultural and scientific and social experiments that involved reshaping and building upon the parklands over the second half of the 19th century. And as the Second World War approached, Royal Park was once again reorganised to accommodate a military camp, which then became post-war housing. So what counts as heritage? Should we go to the next slide? The significance of Royal Park to settler culture has been affirmed with the listing on the Victorian Heritage Register. The heritage study on which the registration is based cites Royal Park's importance to the Victorian cultural history with rare remnant stands of endemic vegetation and its significant vistas which afford dramatic sensory appreciation of the city skyline and its surrounding landscape. Drawing on early colonial diaries and paintings, a number of theorists, including Franco Patelli, Will Gamage and Ferguson, have developed arguments that the 2,000 or so acres of parkland were no happy accident. They had been made over millennia through careful and specific cultural practices by Warren people. The dubious naming, Royal Park, misattributes the estate to a distant monarch who had no tangible connection to this country. But the Victorian planning scheme nevertheless states that apart from a single star tree at the Royal Zoological Gardens, Royal Park has no significant Aboriginal heritage places recorded on the register, even though heritage reports provide significant evidence from settler records of occupation. Okay, which one? No, that's good. Yep. So there are a few reasons why this heritage is neglected. Settler diaries and oral accounts of Royal Park point to a collective use by visiting tribes rather than an exclusive and defended domain of the Wurundjeri. Heritage values have been notoriously difficult to sustain in areas where there's been significant ground disturbance. Indeed, archaeological studies have revealed little evidence of artefacts that confirm Indigenous occupation prior to colonisation, and an entry into an Aboriginal the Heritage Register under the Aboriginal Heritage Act requires submission of some tangible evidence of occupation by the native title holder, traditional owner, or registered Aboriginal party. Amendments to that Act in 2016 now allow for intangible heritage to be included in the register, but this is to allow for the protection of stories and other knowledges rather than tangible places. And again, the burden of proof is high. Finally, oral accounts of Indigenous people are partial and largely contemporary and scattered. The deterritorialising effects of displacement in Victoria have been profound. As Libby Porter and Janice Barry have argued, Aboriginal heritage laws operationalise the discourse that Indigenous values cannot survive modernity. As a consequence, Royal Park's Aboriginal history has been subjugated to the well-documented colonial histories. So despite this disruption and fragmentation, there are memories across the Indigenous community in Victoria that authors in this paper confirm have an enduring historic connection to Royal Park. Some memories are prosaic, others are profound. Indigenous place attachment is an evolving phenomenon. It's not located at some moment in the past, as Paul Kelly, Greenock and Paul Emmett have shown in their co-authored papers. 8 of the 9 authors who collaborated on this paper come from a range of Aboriginal groups, including traditional owners of the lands in which Royal Park is situated, the Wurundjeri people, but also other tribal groups from Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. But each recount their personal histories and stories of their experiences. So the reason we gather them together is none provide a complete picture of the park, but together they form a really important synthetic assemblage that reveals a place that's important for healing, health and well-being. It's skipping, isn't it, right? That's okay, Al will take over.
So, whether there are these words like Jerka, Ugaragara, and locally, Guruguru, Northern Rock, which refer to the spiritual, physical, sort of ongoing, ever-present nexus, which we call the dreaming, but is incredibly important for Aboriginal people, no matter sort of how much they're interested in the old ways. And so what that means is that the park has got, surrounded by buildings. There's a whole typology of the city that Janet and other architects would describe. But Aboriginal people can look almost back through time to what it was like when there was a creek just running up over here, and there's all the food up in Carlton when it's at the swamp in terms of the yields and the birds. And why this was a perfect campground. And it extended, it wasn't just one, there was a whole series of them. So, for example, Northern Motherwell, so it depends on my mother's ancestors, they would come down along Meeting Ponds Creek all the way from the other side of Ballarat, up in the pinnacle of Ararat. It might take them a number of days to get down, but you follow the creek lines down, and there are these intertribal places where you could safely, without being killed, travel if you want to talk to the Waterong, in particular the Wurundjeri, but the other Waterong tribes. And, and this was a place where people might stay for many weeks at a time. Marriages would be organised, business would be done, there'd also be ceremony at quite a high level in terms of healing as well as law and opportunities. Because even today, when law is practiced in terms of the dreaming law, Bulgara or Jerka or Birrabil, more than north, tribes will come together and help each other to have that law occur in an ongoing way. So it was an incredibly important place. And so, it's funny because when Jan and I talk about this, there's an absence, but yet you don't have to look very fast if you have that spiritual, physical dreaming lens to see the powerful presence. Almost like in country, whether it be a particular swamp gum or a new tree that's been put in, it may reflect or be marked by country. Because in the old days, I used to say that old people would say, you got a possum from one country, a possum from another, the actual skin would reflect the country that the possum was from. In other words, everything was emplaced and marked by that spiritual, physical, dreaming nexus. I know this might sound funny, but it's Aboriginal, it's culture. So we'll just keep going. So this is what this is about. So Maura, who's a wonderful friend of ours, Uncle Gary Murray, he had an extraordinary experience. He came from Ballarat, he was here in Campbell. He also trained with the Melbourne Footy Club, and I used to train and run around Royal Park. And if we keep going to the next day, he has nothing but great memories of Royal Park. His partner, now passed, Amy Margaret Gardner, very significant Wurundjeri elder and very significant for us. She can tell you some of the political history. Jeff Kennett, Ron Walker, and the promises of development. And she talked a lot about Auntie Winnie, a very significant Wurundjeri elder, now passed, but a couple of generations back, who had enormous troubles because much was promised to the Wurundjeri and by these white leaders, often men, and then nothing was delivered. That's okay, because these are snippets of statements, so we can keep going. It was really interesting that Auntie Mar Gardner made a very significant point when we were writing this paper, which is that we've got to get away from box ticking. It's got to be genuine dialogue, genuine engagement. And I think a lot of Aboriginal people and community groups have found that really hard, because if they come and say, like I am with you, start talking about the dream and as a reality in this spiritual, physical nexus, that this is as important as a cathedral in the Christian sense, to connect in the Aboriginal sense, that can just get poo-pooed as just, of no consequence. But it is of consequence, because it's been going for so many thousands of years. We were just actually at a corroboree in the desert, in the Kimberley, just last week. And, the Uncle Phil, who was leading the singing up of the spirits of the country when the initiated boys were doing their pelican dance, he made a comment that, this has been here way before Christianity. We had a revelation of God, he said, way before Christianity. And, he shared that with us and other people who were there. Next slide. Sue Ann Hunter, the commissioner, she talked about something prosaic but yet profound. How wonderful it was to park, because we, when we had the Tanderan, could come up here as Wurundjeri young people, and we could dress up, we could practice, and we felt safe. And I thought, isn't that lovely that Sue Ann? She and her Uncle Colin Hunter made a point that it was very much an intertribal campground, because it wasn't a sacred place. It wasn't country that they would defend, with taking lives. It was a communal place. And Sue Ann said how much she enjoyed it. Next slide ahead. Sharon Monta, wonderful woman I worked with at the hospital. She's always had a very strong sense of the spiritual significance and the cultural significance. She used to love coming out and having her lunch at this little billabong, just over here, with that beautiful vista. used to feel very connected. In fact, that was one of my first experiences about 10 years ago, having lunch with her just out here, and her talking about how much this meant for her as a way of just actually rebalancing herself as an Aboriginal woman. Next one. Ready? Auntie Esther, wonderful woman now passed, but very significant role for us in our project. Stories will never be lost. You go back on country and the old fellows will come back and will always give you a thing of it. Let you know what's important to you. Country will give you a thing of it, she used to say. She was the most amazing woman, and she would look at the detail like a great elder. Because how did ants build a nest? You know, and which side was higher than the other, and how the ants would come out, their configuration. She would read country at that level. And for me, I just wanted to make that point in the paper, but the stories are there anyway. The spiritual physical reality is there anyway in Aboriginal culture. Even if there's buildings on it and stuff happens, like has happened to the park over the last couple of 100 years. But those stories can still be connected through the dream. Next one. Moira, again, a very spiritual woman, used to work with us at the Wajah. She said that most definitely the trees are alive, creatures that live there, and there's a spirituality and a nearness feeling for that country. Aboriginal practitioners talked, she said, where they've had conversations they couldn't have had in the hospital out in the park. You know, and Selena used to say she would actually go to these rocks and sit in the park to have these difficult conversations, particularly if there was an issue with the war and tensions, cultural tensions, and she'd take Aboriginal men and women there in order to help them rebalance so that they could actually better manage the hospital. Because you can imagine if you've got a child, if you're a crofter, a farmer, Aboriginal, bang around your way, you come into the hospital and your child's got leukemia or, you know, and all the rigours and strictures of, you know, oncology, that's a big culture shock when you're just used to, you know, being in the land and your children are used to being in the land, and suddenly, you know, there's a sterile structure. A lot of those sort of tensions, and so they used to bring those sorts of men out into the park to help them acclimatise, so that we wouldn't have code grades, you know, security when called in, so that people get a little emotional. Next one.
Yeah, so I think the interesting part of that process of yarning with people really challenges history's focus on the new concept of time, where there was past, there was present, and we recount the past of this fixed, completed story. Because history does tell many stories that have enduring consequence. So Indigenous epistemologies, by contrast, have this notion that the past, the present, and the future kind of coexist. They have this more circular relationship. As Irene Watson, who is a Punning woman from South Australia and Professor of Law, has explained, the dreaming is an ever-present place of the before, now, and the future, a place that we are constantly returned to. And ethnographer Deborah Bird Rose has also elaborated that the dreaming is a dynamic and non-linear place, a historical inversion in which the past is jumping ahead and life is lived in orientation towards its origins. In Aboriginal cultures, the dreaming is performed cyclically. It's not something that is completed. It's performed through ceremony, through dance, and through song, in a way that doesn't just recount a story from their time, but rather brings the creation into being anew. And these new place stories are much the same. So while some of the people that we've spoken to have encountered Royal Park as adults, or when they've arrived in Melbourne working at the hospital from interstate, they have this sense of this ongoing creative force within the park that sustains them, and gives them an opportunity to find health and well-being when a hospital becomes a place that is toxic for them. So while dreaming stories in this place may have been lost, there are these new stories that echo across the ages, we feel. So architectural history tends to translate most directly into practice through heritage reports. You know, this is a process by which architects, if they encounter a site that has an Aboriginal heritage overlay on it, or any other heritage overlay, they look at these reports to see how buildings and sites should be protected. And Royal Park has actually been the focus of a few of them to determine whether or not projects can go through it, one being the East-West Link, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. The Native Title Act from 1993 and the Traditional Owners Settlement Act in 2010, and then the Aboriginal Heritage Act of 2006 have all been ostensibly some kind of attempt to offer some form of land justice to Aboriginal people. But as anthropologist Patrick Wolfe has argued, even these laws end up perpetuating the settler colonial logic of elimination. There is this process always of reinstating a kind of categorical approach to understanding history, categorical approach to tying particular people to land and excluding others. Despite almost 3 decades of legal attempts to undo colonial dispossession, planning legislation on the whole remains fairly blind to the persistent subjugation of Aboriginal presence. Aboriginal clinicians, as Alan's explained at the Children's Hospital, would really like to see this vision that Auntie Margaret Gardner has talked about of a Wurundjeri place become reality. And we know that there is another process underway at the moment to review Royal Park from the City of Melbourne and renew that kind of understanding of the place, and they have been much more inclusive in their approach to try and involve traditional owners and also a whole lot of stakeholders that are involved in the park, because Auntie Margaret's enduring sadness was that the vision Auntie Winnie had for a place had ended up turned into the Seven Seasons park for kids that anyone could go to. It wasn't really a place that they felt safe in. So there is an ongoing process at the moment underway to try and turn the garden outside of the work of the Aboriginal family place into a place that has bush foods and bush medicine growing and redo the landscape there. That's really all we wanted to say, so we might hand over.
Can I say one last thing? Because it just said, and this might help from an Aboriginal point of view, that one thing that I found really helpful being married to Jan and then talking for years and years and years, like 35 years, was that cadastral mapping was something that was very important when the settlers arrived. What's really interesting from an Aboriginal point of view is that there was never, even one creek being on one side Jabberwong, on the other Watherong, or you know, it wasn't like that. Like, what happened was it was a whole ecosystem. So it was like, you know, where the surface and the deeper water ran, and where particular fungus came up at particular times of year, particular plants. So like boundaries between people's country, it wasn't just like a western fence. It was actually like a whole nuanced ecosystem, and you read that. You read country, and you were immersed in country. It's very hard to frame that, and that's not why Aboriginal culture and Western culture just, you know, doesn't see eye to eye so deeply, because there were none of these fences, you know, and saying this is mine, that's yours. Well, no one owned anything, of course. You know, that's ownership. You're a custodian of the country, but it was always much more nuanced, you know. And I think that's something very interesting that I realised in having a look at this more deeply. And here in this park, this surface water where the soaks are, you've got like seasonal water and permanent water. How it all works, it's quite complex. But there were people in the old days, the old people, who knew that knowledge of how to read the country at that level. So to add that.
Thank you. So 5 minutes for any questions before we go to Andrew. Yeah.
I was just going to ask about, you mentioned about the children's playground and what was actually asked for and was not provided with that result. I mean, it's been hard to read on a lovely place for the kids to go, which
Yeah.
is all great.
And Auntie Margaret said it is lovely, she doesn't disagree
Yeah.
that it's lovely.
So, whereabouts would this other place be where you would sort of generate a more nuanced place with?
Well, my understanding is that the more recent conversations that the City of Melbourne planners have had with Wurundjeri is to make a women's place over near the old
where the Tangerine, we're surrounded with
where
the Tangerine
the urban camp is,
Yeah,
that's
the
in
urban
that
camp.
area.
Yeah. See, Auntie Winnie had this vision, and she felt really affirmed. That's the Wurundjeri at the time. But then I think it was that Ron Walker, Jeff Kennett sort of era, and they got completely destroyed by that because everything that had been promised and discussed just got sort of, disregarded. So, there was no dialogue.
Auntie Winnie and Margaret Gardner would be horrified to know that the first iteration of that, what they call nature play, it was straight out of Europe, all Rangay and it was just horrendous, and it was, in fact, I think the local people were totally criticised because they said it's not even looking like Royal Park. It doesn't. Where's it? There wasn't even a picture of Royal Park. Trying to take the photography, anything, and it took a huge effort for that to be turned around against council planners at that time. Mary, you might correct me.
Yeah.
And
Let's leave it
against the landscape architect of that.
Well done, because
Paul Gangay.
the larger kids that I work with, they love that. So again, that's great. Yeah, what you achieve is wonderful because I know the kids love it and it works.
But that experience was not the only experience they had. They'd had discussions about the Burnley Circus site being given over for a Wurundjeri. I can't remember what the name was. So it was going to be like a Wurundjeri village. It was supposed to be a village of some sort. It was going to be
a cultural
centre. I think they called it a village though. And the site that they were offered ended up being toxic.
Yeah,
so they couldn't build on it. So instead, Jeff Kennett took the Zach brief and then put it in the Melbourne Museum. And that's the centre.
Oh, and it's a history here. Auntie Bunter, Uncle Her's partner passed now, who did We Were in the Cemetery. I mean, people say that was such a granite-laden, difficult place to bury people that it just cost them $6,000 to actually dig a grave. And that was given over to the Aboriginal people of the Aboriginal cemetery. So, and of course, everyone in the community talks, because that's not a very welcoming thing to do, bury your dead, and it costs you a huge amount just to get rid of all the granite, so you can actually put it.
And they're trying to renovate the Aboriginal Advancements League at the moment, and next to the story on, they've discovered that it's a dump underneath, so that, there's no decent way to get foundation.
So.
Yeah, so there's been this long history of either being offered something and it being only given because it's and no one else wants it. Or the great idea has been taken and then used in another context. And then
Now we've got one more question.
Really? Yeah, see that's
It's shocking. It's shocking to hear that it was originally 2,500 acres, but immediately cut down to 400 acres, and the encroachment, it's just every direction, and we should all be standing up for it. Every time I walk through the shared golf course, I hear pop, 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 golf course sound, and I just dream of being rewilded and walking through a forest with groves and stuff. It's so
that would be the life, wouldn't it?
yeah.
I'm the same. I find the golf thing a bit awkward because we can't take the kids over there because I don't want to play with them.
I still actually find it remarkable that there is, you know, there does have this wildness about it, so different from the other park in Melbourne.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm sure others in the audience here would share that sort of appreciation of the space and the environment.
Yeah.
You talked about.
Oh, it is, and I can just say to you, thank you for your advocacy, because all those Wodger kids, many of them out of home caring, they've had terrible lives, they love the park and they love the healing that it provides. And we're not going to stop. We're going to keep, you know, doing this cultural healing work in addition to the Western Health in the park. And we're, again, very pleased that the planners have been so open. I just want to acknowledge that too, that where we met, that Alicia and the others have been really open to this as an important part of the park. So thank you.
We want the moon on back.
Oh,
The end days.
yeah, hard to grow.
When are you going to start doing cultural burning there?
Well, hang on.
So I think it's time to move on to our next presenter.